Hi guys, it's Dr. Doug. Hope you're well. Congratulations, you made it through the first 2 weeks, and I hope you did the practice as designed. Not to worry at all if you're not perfect, but like on the other hand, if you decided to make this easier and do all the practices in the morning or do them all at night, please start to spread them throughout the day. Okay, that's an important part of this secret here. If we ground throughout the day, we're grounding all the different brain states that we have through the day. And they convert much more quickly that way than if you just do a practice at the beginning or the end of the day. That's why someone who has a 2-hour meditation in the morning can do this 15 minutes of practice as designed, and it's just life-changing for them. So please do try and keep on track or get back on track if you're off. It's amazingly efficient at updating your brain, but you do need to do it. And it's a little intense at the beginning. You're fighting off a long-standing habit of your inner critic being in charge of your brain. The brain is 95% habit-driven. So it's really powerful when you start a new habit that tricks the brain into letting go of the past. So now this is your third week, and I was going to move into this story of you and explore your growing up, and I changed my mind because before we get into the story of who you are, your childhood, your family, genetic issues, experiences, all those things that are leading to your self-limiting beliefs, I wanted to teach you about self-compassion first because that's the primary practice that I want you to have. So everything that comes out of the critic is going to be likely painful and scary and judgmental. So you will need a self-compassion practice to replace the critic. If you already have self-compassion practices that work for you, that's great. Please use them. If not, here's some guidance. So we don't want any negativity sticking around because it doesn't serve any good purpose, right? Remember, the only pain that's reasonable to keep around is the pain of grief, which is honoring your love for someone or something that you've lost. If grief comes with any other negativity, like guilt, unfinished business, we want to neutralize that. Without the inner critic to distract you from feeling the fear, pain, or grief, you'll need another way to cope, the way of the heart. So let's look at compassion. When life is good, the heart just loves life. When life is painful and scary, what we would often call bad, because it's so difficult, that's when we have compassion. That's how the heart meets suffering. Compassion is from the heart, not the inner critic, so it's non-judgmental. We say, that's suffering, instead of that's bad. And it's an important distinction, because being in judgment from the inner critic, it never changes. You're stuck there. It never resolves. The work of grief can only be accomplished by the heart. Grief does move forward and change. We'll learn more about that in the coming weeks. So what does self-compassion look like? Let me tell you first what it's not. Because most people that I've shared this with, when they hear self-compassion, at least in American culture, have misunderstood. And the most important misunderstanding is to say, well, I don't want to have a pity party, right? And boy, doesn't that make sense? Well, let me explain why self-compassion is pretty much the opposite of a pity party. A pity party is just another manifestation of the inner critic, by the way, basically the victim. So, self-compassion starts with being mindfully present. With a pity party, it starts with you being stuck in your head and your story of what's wrong and bad. With self-compassion, you're in your heart, and you're just, if what is painful, then you're just feeling the pain of what is, even if it's heartbreaking. In self-compassion, you're acknowledging what's real from full presence. Starting from your heart, you can be present and fair. So for example, if you screw up and you realize, well, it doesn't make you especially bad because you screwed up. It just means that you screwed up. Humans do that. It doesn't mean anything more. It just means that it happened. That's it. The way that you screwed up, if somebody else had your circumstances, your genetics, and your history, they probably would have screwed up in exactly the same way, and they would be struggling in the same way that you're struggling. That's being fair. Compassion is fair, and it's also kind. So what happens next is that when we screw up, we don't like it. It's disappointing. It hurts. But you can be kind to yourself instead of judge yourself for it. How do you show this kindness? Well, it starts with being in relationship with that experience rather than identifying with it. So instead of saying, I'm angry, you say, I'm experiencing anger right now. Or I'm experiencing hurt right now as a tension here in my body and as this kind of thinking in my mind. Kindness is an intention of goodness, to comfort or challenge yourself, whichever is necessary. So instead of beating yourself up for what you did or what you're feeling, you focus on your anger or your hurt as an experience, and you send a kind intention from your heart, just like you would if you were wishing or praying for someone else. So if you're aware and you're fair and you're kind, that's self-compassion. By the way, if you actually want to change how you screwed up at some point, self-compassion is much more effective than beating yourself up. Beating yourself up disconnects you from the learning and motivation centers in your brain. That's why they say, whatever you resist will persist. This is how that happens. It's the inner critic at work. Compassion changes it. Compassion lets you change you. So let me tell you the Kristin Neff story briefly. She is a psychologist who helped bring self-compassion to the scientific community in the last decade or so. And here we go. She is at a store with her son. She's leaving the store, and her son is autistic, and so he, as he often does, he collapses to the ground, throws a tantrum, and meanwhile is defecating, which is getting really messy. So here she is with her child whom she loves and with whom she's very frustrated in this moment and wants to get him up as fast as possible. This is very embarrassing. And you know, when he's screaming and crying like this, the question becomes, well, who thinks I'm a terrible parent, right? And she needs to get the groceries to the car. So she needs to go into problem-solving mode. But before she does that, she just takes a pause and she acknowledges, like, this is a moment with suffering in it. And I'm going to approach this moment with kindness from my heart. That's it. That's basically it. But do you imagine that problem-solving mode from, you know, a hard-driven professional American scientist would feel different than if she had started from her heart? Now the problem-solving mode is going to be, I think, completely a different experience for her son, and for anyone who's nearby. Okay, so that's the first example. Acknowledge the suffering. Be in a relationship with that suffering. It's just an experience. It's not who you are. And then move into what needs to get done. The next piece, this is called the triple shift. And this is a strategy. It's just 3 shifts that help you if you have thinking that's really disturbing you. So here's an example. I had a situation at work once, and I was like, oh my gosh, I really was afraid that I had hurt a person's feelings. Now I'm an insomniac, so I'm laying here thinking about this at 3 o'clock in the morning. All these thoughts and anxiety are swimming around inside my head, and I remember I've been teaching this thing, the triple shift, for the last several months to all my patients. Maybe I could try it. Pull it out of my head. And so the first thing I do is I get all my thinking right in front of me so I can look at it and see it. It's really crucial to recognize, instead of being lost in my thoughts, I can get a little perspective on them, just that much. And then I want to put them kind of into my little chalice here. And these are all the thoughts, and on the outside I'm going to label them. I'm going to title this with what I'm feeling. So I'm making a good distinction here between my thinking and here's my feelings. I'm frustrated, I'm anxious, I'm embarrassed, I'm ashamed, whatever it might be, right? And then, and by the way, the thing that happened isn't really the problem right now, because it's over and done, whatever it was. What's happening right now is my thinking. So don't make the mistake of thinking that it's the thing that happened that's upsetting you. If it's 3 o'clock in the morning, like with me, the only thing that's really happening is I'm thinking about it. I'm lost in those thoughts. Well, as I put that story in here, recognize I'm the storyteller, I put it in there, I label it, and I've identified these feelings: frustrated, ashamed, anxious, embarrassed, whatever it is. Now I shift from the story to the feelings, and then I go from my feelings to, how do I know I have these feelings? They're in my body. So now I let go of the story completely and I just look inward. Where do I feel these sensations in my body? And then I'll bring my hands to my body in a kind way, so that I can care for myself in the midst of this suffering. Then you can repeat it. Check in with your story. You're still feeling distressed. You go to the story, to the feelings, to the body, bring it kindness. Well, actually, when I used it, it was so effective, I didn't even have to repeat it. So now I'm taken care of and I'm ready to address the person I needed to talk to. Now I can speak from presence instead of the inner critic. I can be curious and empathic and ask, hey, how did my behavior impact you? So there it is. Self-compassion can be practiced by just acknowledging in this moment there's suffering, taking a moment to bring that kind awareness before proceeding into the situation and doing something about it. I'm going to bring kindness to myself and to others before I jump in and try to solve a problem that I'm facing. Just takes a moment. Or the triple shift. I'm really upset. I'm going to tell the story I'm telling myself. I'm going to label it with feelings that that story causes. Take those feelings and notice where they're happening in my body and bring kind touch to my body. Now I'm in a whole different place. So you can do these as many times as you want. What's important is that you start to identify, this is just anger. I'm not angry, this is just anger. So at any rate, both of those strategies are ones that I want you to start playing with this week, and I'll create them into some of the reflections. I'm going to give you some new practices this week to do during the day. So, okay, thank you for tuning in, and this week we're going to keep going with those practices, okay? You need to keep burning those into your brain as a new process. And all of this and the self-compassion will prepare us for next week when we look into the family stories and kind of the birth of your inner critic, okay? Have a great week, and I'll see you in practice.